On paper where the story's told, facts and truth, the legend grows. Lionheart's here with fire to spit. It's on paper with Anthony Smith.
With Anthony Smith. Welcome back to On Paper. I am Kelly Murphy. More importantly, that is my co-host, my better half, UFC light heavyweight, and the ultimate girl dad himself, Anthony Lionheart Smith. Anthony, how are you?
I'm good. I am good. We are obviously recording late.
Well, you've been here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah, I took my family to Disney over the weekend into Monday and Tuesday, but it was a nice little reprieve from the day-to-day monotony of training camp. So I got some really good training. Obviously, California is a hotbed of MMA. Was able to get some work in with some people that I'd never worked with before, but have always had a want to.
Nice.
Yeah, seen some cool stuff. You know, just some different angles, different ways to look at things, and you know, got some good pushes. It's nice to get different bodies in front of you that you're not used to. So,
Sure.
And was able to do the Disney thing. You know, I was doing it with doing the Disney thing with the family in the morning, and then dip out and train, and then come back and meet them again, and then train. It was cool. It was cool. I had a lot of fun.
I don't know how you're standing. That sounds like a lot. Now you're back in Denver training again.
Yeah, and I'm already. They're not even home yet. I'm back in Denver. I've already trained, and here hanging out with you. How are you, by the way? How was your weekend and the start of your week?
I will say, as we always note at the beginning of these episodes, our lives are very different. I went out Saturday night with my best friend Dan, who you know.
Yeah,
he's come to some of our shows in New York City. And I woke up Sunday.
Hungover.
Hungover, anxiety. Mm-hmm. My hip felt like it was broken. My right orbital felt like someone punched me in the face. And I have a big bruise over here.
Damn, what'd you get into?
I don't know. I don't think anything. But you know, I can't really trust Dan's opinion because we did wake up at his house and there was 2 burnt pieces of toast in his air fryer. So
you got a bad hip from 2 pieces of burnt toast?
No, I woke up on his decorative couch, which is not meant to be slept on, which I think attributed to the hip pain or just
Did you fall down?
I did not fall down.
How do you know?
Well, I don't, but Dan said I did not. So we can only take his word for it.
Oh, man. You know, all of us here at the On Paper podcast, and by all of us, I mean me, because I'm the only other one here.
Right.
And you know, and the listeners and watchers and followers
who think I'm a hot mess.
Yeah, we're thinking about having an intervention with you pretty soon. So you have to get it out of your system. You're getting too old for this shit. You gotta find a man, get a family. You're running out of time.
According to you, that'll never happen though.
Well, you're running out of time for sure.
Running out of time? I'm not even 28.
It's almost done.
All right. You know what?
Anyways.
Let's stop this before it gets out of hand. Yeah. Since you want to be so mean to me, we could talk about how horrific your picks have been the last few weeks. And that's why we're about to bring in Dan Tom, because we need an expert around here.
I had to bring in the big guns. It's the fighters. It's not me. I don't know what's going on. They're just not doing what I think they're going to do.
It's been you the last 2 weeks. You guys did win split decision, which we'll get to after Dan last week, but you only got 2 fights right again.
We won. That's all that matters. Why do we have to get deeper into the weeds?
Yeah, but don't talk about Gilbert and Hanazo not doing their part.
Oh, I mean, I carried this whole thing for like 6 weeks. What are you talking about? Anyways.
We bring in a fantastic analyst with MMA Junkie, Dan Tom. Dan, how are you?
Hey, I've only been doing good recently. I've been in the dumps the last year or so myself, but I appreciate being on Chop It Up with you guys. I'm great.
Yeah, man, it's good to see you. It's been a while since we've been able to catch up. Hopefully, while Kelly is hanging out in the background, probably making fun of me, hopefully she's, I think she's got like a list like that she's compiled of like the worst picks that I've made. And sometimes I have a pretty good justification for it, and sometimes I really don't have one. But before we kind of get just talking about this UFC 314 card, what have you been up to? Like, what as far as the sport goes, and how have things been?
Pretty good, man. Just been pretty busy. Of course, we're on all the as UFC fans know, we're on an 11 week run, which from the people, the unsung heroes that work for the production side of the UFC, to the people who cover the sport, as you're doing both now. You're in the cage and out of the cage, so you understand both grinds, Anthony. We start to feel it toward the end of this, but man, after a recent health scare, I maybe would dare equate it to maybe a fighter like yourself having an injury, like can I fight or not, right? I had something almost compromise my voice earlier this year as a cancer scare, and got past that with some surgery. So I'm honestly just grateful to be here, man. I'm happy to chop it up.
Wow, man, I didn't know that. What happened? If you don't mind me asking, if you want me to just move on, we can, but
No, no
uh
worries. No, it's
like
a pretty common thing. I mean, it's a pretty common thing. They just spotted a lesion there that could potentially have turned cancer. They treated it like cancer. They took a whole chunk. They resectioned my throat, on the inside, and came back negative, thankfully. But whether you're going regular dental checkups or ear, nose, and throat specialists, those people are there for a reason, folks. So they see something, listen to them.
right. Did you have any pain or just was totally random and popped up?
Yeah, well, my voice was kind of raspy and stuff. I don't even know if it's fully back now, but I've had it before. I figured it was just from talking, and doing this sort of job for so many years, which is part and parcel with it. So I thought it was nothing serious. It's come back before, but it wasn't coming back. And then they spotted the lesion. There was also some pain as well. Yeah. So I thought it was maybe just a sore throat. And yeah, man, I wasn't sure if I was, going the way of Michael Douglas or not, but we got it taken care of, and making some lifestyle changes because I think that's what it has to do with.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm glad everything worked out okay and you're good to go. It's tough to do. It's tough to do your job with no voice. That's for sure. Of course, we want to jump into this UFC 314 card for sure. But if you were to pull yourself, I guess, away from the main card, because I figured we sit here and we just kind of go through the whole main card and just kind of see what it looks like from a betting perspective. And honestly, I think I've told you this before. I really respect your just general analysis of the fights away from the betting side. So I've always been interested in listening to how you look at things. So other than the main card, is there anything that stands out on UFC 314 that maybe is worth mentioning?
Yeah, no, too kind, man, coming from you, Anthony. But if I were to, make a guess, and not just speak for myself, but maybe even speak for you, I guess that a fight that would jump out to not myself, but also maybe to someone like you, is Jim Miller versus Chase Hooper, which is on the prelims. A lot of good fights on the prelims, but that one, both from a fan perspective, an entertainment perspective, or a gambling perspective, I really think it generates interest on all three fronts. Some quick stats, of course. Jim Miller 4-7 against the UFC level southpaws. It's a southpaw versus southpaw matchup, which is always tricky, right? Because I suck in whatever, but speaking for the perspective of a southpaw, I always say no one hates facing southpaws more than other southpaws. So as much as
Yeah.
the orthodox guys complain about, oh, I got to get paired with the lefty, us lefties want to be like, no, quiet, man. Nobody hates southpaws more than us, okay? And it kind of changes the dynamic because you predicate your game so much against the majority of your opposition in the gym, which is orthodox opposition, right? So it almost like you were turning a matchup on its head when we get two southpaws, which is always fun. Chase Hooper is technically 1-1, but he also fought a southpaw in the Contender Series, Anthony, and both in that fight and in his loss, which is Steve Garcia, underrated featherweight. Those left crosses over the shoulder, they're just so potent in that lefty versus lefty matchup. It's like a blind spot over the shoulder. And he was just getting lit up by those, right? And he did beat Jordan Levitt, but that was a really quick grappling match. I'm not sure how much to take from that from a striking perspective. But all this to say that I do think that Jim Miller has a quiet striking advantage in this fight.
Do you just again from just from looking at the fight, black and white X's and O's? I do feel like we've kind of quietly seen Chase Hooper kind of turn into a man. I interviewed him one time and it was one of the most fascinating interviews that I've ever had. Probably one of my funnest experiences in terms of being on the broadcasting side. Because honestly, I don't think a lot of us know a lot about Chase Hooper. We know that he's a young kid. We joke around that he's Ben Askren's son. He looks like he's 18 or 19 years old. He's always smiling and having fun. He's got incredible jiu-jitsu and at times has struggled in the striking. But it seems like he's starting to close that gap quickly in terms of the striking. But I don't think we give him enough credit for is him kind of being a dog. He's had a really, really tough life. Just before fighting and before all this stuff and kind of the path that got him into MMA, he's had a really, really tough life, a tough home life, a tough upbringing that drug him that pushed him to the gym, I suppose would be a better way to say it. And I think that mentality has showed itself in fights, but I don't know that we give him enough credit for that.
No, I think it's a great point. Like I was listening to him speak, and I just couldn't get over, which I think correlates to what you're saying, how mature he is. And sometimes for that maturity to happen at such a young age, to your point, Anthony, there's some adversity there that perhaps that shapes him that we don't really maybe give enough credit to. And his skills have definitely come out, especially in the area that you said, which is key, I think, for him winning this fight, is the dogged ability. You look at a lot of those fights that Jim Miller lost against those southpaws. He technically has more losses against southpaws than wins, right? But most of those losses were grappling based, and a lot of times, getting mauled against the cage. Even guys that were long, like Nate Diaz, that long 1-2, it was really more that underrated aspect of Nate's game, which Chase also has, right? Where he's doing quiet work in the clenching. He's long and gangly. He may not look strong there, but Anthony, those little knees and those little hooks to the liver and body, that really adds up, especially if you're facing a guy who just is not afraid to fight from negative positions and doesn't get tired. That will accumulate, even if it doesn't look like much. So I'm really glad you highlighted that, because I think those are the key aspects for Chase winning this fight this Saturday.
Yeah, I totally agree. And just a quick note, I found it so fascinating when I was talking to him that he was like married to like his childhood kind of sweetheart, and he's a dad. It's so crazy,
Yeah.
like now they have a child. It's like, I don't know, it's kind of cool for me as the older guy that's on my own way out, seeing these younger guys coming up and just kind of turning into men. It's pretty goddamn cool to see. If we jump to the main card, um I think we're kicking it off. If mine's correct, I think we're kicking it off with Nikita Krylov versus Dominic Reyes, which is again, a really fascinating fight for me, partially because it's my division. So it's two guys that I have eyes on. I obviously fought Dominic Reyes. But I've said for a long time, I think Nikita Krylov is kind of the dark horse in the division. He makes some really stupid decisions at times, but he's never really been blown out. He's always kind of right there, and sometimes I think he gets frazzled sometimes, and then just puts his foot on the gas, and it's gotten him in trouble. But just from a betting perspective, before you kind of look at the rest of the fight, how do you see this one?
Yeah, from a betting perspective, Dominic Reyes jumps out as a live dog for me. He's another kind of a explosive southpaw there. And Krylov, he's got a decent record. I believe it's either 2-3 or 2-4 off the top of my head, right? But even some of those were striking based, like up at heavyweight, Walt Harris, right, who's a southpaw. He actually, he head kicked Walt Harris to start off that stoppage, right? So he's got these underrated skills. That you can't overlook. And to your point, I like what you said too, because kind of maybe not similar to a Chase Super, but in the same sense that like you think Krylov's going to be like 40 or something because he's been around forever, but he's only in his early 30s, which is like a baby in your division,
Yeah.
in these heavier weight classes. And I think people forget that they have this tighter timeline where, MMA gamblers especially are super ageist. The sport is very, I get it. It's not a young man's sport, but at the same time, I think people kind of overcorrect that steering wheel a bit too much at times and forget like, hey, these heavier guys, and look your career yourself too. Like if people were to judge you off your beginning, even parts of the middle of your career, they would have gotten it all wrong as far as your ceiling goes, right, Anthony? And the higher weight classes,
Hmm.
sometimes you blossom a little later. And I think that is a thing with Krylov too, because he's gotten better at the decision making, and he's been more of an active wrestler. Which, as you know, in these heavier divisions, if you've got a decent takedown, I mean, you've got an edge over a lot of the competition. So I might be staying away from this fight, even though I was initially interested in the Reyes point of view, because my analysis more stacks up with yours, Anthony. As far as I really do think Krylov, even though he's favored to win this fight, I do think he's a bit underrated.
Yeah, I've never been much of a gambling guy, like, because, and not because I just didn't want to. Obviously, I can't now, but I just never quite understood it. And that's why I get so fascinated in these conversations, because I don't know that the Krylov fight is a fight that I would have ever bet on, just because I can't trust him.
Hmm.
If you have two people that I'm pretty sure I know what you're getting, then that's a fight that I'm probably more comfortable getting into. but I just can't. I wouldn't bet a steak dinner on Krylov. Not because I don't think he can win. I think he's good enough to beat anybody in the division at any given time. Just at times he's inconsistent. You know, he was very easily drawn into Ryan Spann's bullshit. And as a guy who's been in there twice with Ryan Spann, it's very easy to stay away from the bullshit.
Right.
like
Yeah.
it feels different when you're in there. There's some guys where you just get wrapped up into it, like Glover. Like you start having some fun and you get wrapped up into the game, and you know that it's a bad decision, but it's a lot of fun. The Ryan Spann one was kind of like, nah, I don't really want to play that stupid goddamn game. I'm going to be over here doing the shit that's easier. I don't want to do that. And Krylov was very easily drawn into that. So that makes me not trust him for sure. Dominic Reyes, in terms of him, he's a bit inconsistent. Obviously, we've seen him on big runs, we've seen him on big skids, you know, and then I get him, and he's really well trained, stuck to a game plan, unwilling to engage at times, which is not his style. It actually made him very hard to fight. He's a much better fighter when he's a little more thoughtful about the times he does want to fire, when he wants to disengage and circle. That version of Dominic Reyes is very, very good and is going to give a lot of people in the division problems. I just can't count on him showing up every single time. And that's not saying anything bad. That's just his game, you know? Then we get into, I think this is like the people's main event, right? Maybe not the people's main event, but definitely the one that I think people are very interested in. It's one I'm fascinated by for sure. It's Bryce Mitchell, Gene Silva. I'm going to be honest. I don't know, again, that I don't know that, I don't even know how to say this without sounding like an idiot. Sometimes you don't know how good people are until they get in there with people that you're very sure of where they are. Like, we know where Bryce Mitchell is in terms of the division, his skill set, who he can beat, maybe who he can't beat, and where he needs to go to be successful. I don't know that we know that about Gene Silva, like, just yet. It's because he's in very favorable matchups. He's obviously very skilled, fights striking's at a very high level. So we just haven't seen him in a bunch of adversity yet. And so it's one of those fights I'd probably stay away from because I'm so unsure of how good he actually is.
That's 100%, you know, and you look at the dynamic of the fight. Obviously, wrestling's probably going to be the crux of this matchup, right? From a stylistic standpoint. And, you know, Charles Jourdain lost to John Silva, got knocked out, and wasn't able to do much uh, scoring wise, much less even control time with his takedowns. But he was able to, you know, attempt and briefly score 3 takedowns. And that's tough. That's our only UFC sample size, I believe, of anybody
Mhm.
meaningfully attempting a takedown on John Silva. So with that question open, you know, it makes it almost hard to, you know, contradict the odds where we're putting, you know, which is decent odds, by the way, 2-1 favorite to a 2-1 underdog. You know, that's a pretty decently wide spread, not super wide, but it's a pretty decent spread. And what it says is that they're, you know, Vegas is fairly, and the public is fairly confident Jean Silva's going to win. And as a bettor, you almost look for these opportunities where, like, you know, as much as we, you know, the public or even you yourself, we all have our biases, may not like a certain person, right? And maybe for good reason. A lot of these things get baked maybe unfairly into the betting line because some of these reasons, and as much as, you know, we could talk about the things that Bryce Mitchell said, which, by the way, tough interview to navigate, and I think you did a great job, Anthony. By the way, I just
Thank
want to
you.
give you props there, dude. But as much as we could wax on about those things, right? How much of those things actually have to do with the fight, right?
Right.
Um, you know, when you get in there, it's a whole other world, as you know. So when you see that baked in as a gambler, you almost want to, you know, pause your conscience, you know, your conscience, your personal biases, as you should as a gambler. You're dealing with money. The feelings might get you in trouble, right? It almost makes you want to maybe do I sprinkle a little bit and fade the public here on Bryce Mitchell, just, you know, to find out if John Silva is that good. To your point, because we still need to find out. I'm picking John Silva to win. By the way, I agree with him being a favorite, maybe not as this big, but I do agree with him being a favorite. But am I going to want to run out and throw money minus 275 on him, especially at that price? You know, not really. I'm going to be staying away from this fight. But Anthony, the question you kind of asked is the exact question everybody needs to be asked, and hopefully we'll get answered this Saturday.
What do you think the chances are that maybe John Silva's matches have been so favorable that they're really just working out for him? Again, Charles Jourdain was a little bit better of I guess, a sample size of a more full mixed martial arts fight, but I don't think anyone would probably put him in the category as a grappler. Um, what do you think the chances are that Bryce can go out there and get a hold of him and just do what Bryce Mitchell does? Because that's
You
really
know,
my
I
question. If Bryce can't get a takedown and hold it, he's in a lot of trouble.
so here's an interesting trend I've noticed, Anthony, and I'm sure you know whether you notice it or not, you'll pick up what I'm putting down. Is that we've seen a lot of the Brazilians, like American Top Team still is like a ridiculous amount of Brazilians. It's got a lot of
Hmm.
Russians now. It's just kind of like the irony, right? It's like American
Right.
Top Team, and you'd see like certain people like from Top Fight Team or certain Brazil teams start working with stateside camps, right? So you saw, former opponents here was like Thiago Santos, right? He was a Tata
Hmm.
fight team guy, and he would go cross train over at ATT, and they'd eventually almost make those transitions permanently, Pantoja, so on and so forth. Now, fighting nerds, of course, they deserve so much credit as one of the new hot camps, right? But even with them, you wonder what their resources are. I know they've asked personal friends of mine, for example, to help game plan for some of their fighters, um, which is fine. That's not abnormal for camps to go outside of their camps for help that ways. But then
Hmm.
I believe there was also reports of Mauricio Hufi, Fighting Nerds teammate, I believe, going down to Connecticut to train with Glover, and I don't want to say too much, but it seems like there might be a connection in the works there. So what that tells me
Right.
is that that's probably good, but also tells me, are they not getting enough of the grappling and wrestling and other things that have traditionally troubled a lot of the Brazilian camps? And you've seen their fighters travel stateside. So
That's
maybe
so
we'll get a better
smart
answer to that,
of you
you
to.
know?
That's so smart of you to put those points together, to connect those dots that most people would never connect. Nobody, not, and I don't mean like leaving isn't permanently, but nobody goes and searches outside of their camp for something that they have plenty of. So if you're, again, Glover's camp is an incredible gym. They have incredible fighters and strikers in there. But if you're a if you're a Brazilian and you need some jujitsu work in the States, Glover's going to be one of the top three people that you're probably thinking of. That's a great point. It's a great point, which does make me wonder, like, if we were just to say who's the better fighter across the board, who's the better fighter, I could pretty confidently probably say John Silva. He's probably the better fighter. I think he's more dangerous in more areas for sure. But I just have such a hard time counting Bryce out, especially having him on here. He had a
Mm.
different little fire in his eyes than I've ever seen before. Whether you agree with his religious stances or not, I'll tell you guys this: he believes every word that he's saying, and he lives that. And Bryce will randomly text me Bible verses. Hey, brother, I was thinking about you today, and this was on my heart. Like he lives it. He truly lives it. So, I used to always say that the reason that I believe Conor McGregor got to the point that he got to so quickly was because he had a delusional belief in himself. And
Yeah.
I've seen that same belief in himself with Bryce. And I don't know. Sometimes that matters, and it's there's no way to quantify it. There's no way to put it on paper. There's no way for me to break that down in a black and white, platform. But it was different. It was different, and maybe that's a bad different. Like, I know that sometimes people get outside of themselves and they get a bit emotional, and that's not always a good thing. Sometimes it works
Yeah.
for people. So again, this is one of those fights I really need to find out, though. I really,
Yeah.
really want to find out. Um, all right. This one is another one of those ones I'll probably stay away from because I have no idea what this looks like. But Yair Rodriguez versus Patricio Pitbull. I just want to sit back and watch it. It's another one of those situations, though. I feel like, are we getting Pitbull too late? Is he on the downside of his career, kind of like a Michael Chandler? I think that Michael Chandler's entire run looks much different 7 or 8 years earlier, or 5 years earlier. Um, that's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid that because we look at the level of competition. I'm not saying that any of those guys that they fought in the other organizations were bad or that they're not good fighters, but the level at the UFC is different. And so we've seen these other people come over from other organizations where they've been extremely dominant and then they look human. And not that I'm rooting for or against anybody, but I hope that that's not the case here. I'd like to see a prime version of Patricio Pitbull.
Yeah, same here. You nailed it. This is another one where I probably should want to stay away from like the other ones. But this one, even though I've stayed away from it so far, man, that Patricio plus money is calling my name. If the public continues to fade him and we get an even better price on Pitbull, then that's going to make me want to want to go in on him more. There's this common theme. I was talking to Kelly about this before we got on, where like this whole card is basically like older, shorter, stout, older, shorter, stouter proven products versus younger, taller, the more air quote sexier opportunist finishers, right? Like that is
Mm-hmm.
the dynamic,
That's
and the
crazy.
money
It
lines have,
is.
and the money lines represent that because you've got people. I believe people might have been opened as the favorite and got flipped. That was the case for Chandler. That was the case. It almost was the case for Volk. Volk money line almost flipped, but everybody's fading the shorter, older. These less popular attributes that may not, you ask a fighter like yourself, might not mean as much as people think, but that's what they put a lot of value into, right? These
Mm-hmm.
numbers and things they can grab onto a lot easier. It's easier to grab onto a number than be like, oh, well, this guy does this and he does against this style and yada yada. That's it's easy to get lost in the weeds there. But yeah, Pitbull's attractive to me, Anthony. It's just is he too old to do it? I don't think the height's a big of a deal. We saw Volkanovski at the same height as Pitbull. They both have mean
Mm-hmm.
counter right hands. They both can wrestle. The only thing is Pitbull isn't as aggressive wrestler as Volkanovski is, which we'll talk about later. People don't give Volkanovski enough credit for that part of his game. He was more like a Khabib actually when he first came in, before his
Mm-hmm.
striking sharpened up. And that's what Pitbull would need to do. And even though Pitbull's got very underrated wrestling to go with his jiu-jitsu folks, and good kick counters as well, I don't know how consistent he's going to push the wrestling for me. And that's what's holding me back from fully pushing my chips in on Pitbull here.
Okay, so if he gets a win, just from a trajectory position, you probably have to sprint him to the finish, right? You can't really slow roll him and get the fans in love. And I mean, it's got to be one or two sexy wins are probably going to be enough for him, I would imagine.
I would hope so. Big fights. I do think he is in somewhat of a win-win though, in a certain way, because I got to imagine that um, for him to finally come over, that he got a deal that was very satisfactory to him, right? But let's say even if he loses this fight, like and whether Chandler wins or loses, I feel like you could even run that back up at a catch weight,
Yeah.
or send him back up to 55 for a fun one where it's like, again, it's like, oh, you could potentially lose two in a row if assuming he lost to Yair here, but at the same time, you know how forgiving the UFC is when those losses come in different divisions, and you can kind of extend his stay, have fun matchups, win or lose. So I think Pitbull will be okay either way. I'm just curious as far as what his title aspirations are if he does win.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I'll be glued to my seat for that one for sure. And then, if I'm being honest, I'm a bit surprised this one is the co-main event. I probably would have flipped Yair Patricio to the main event, I think, or to the co-main, only because I think hindsight, you're going to see that the Yair fight with Patricio is going to be a higher level, more exciting fight. I think
Mhm.
that the stakes are a bit higher, and I think the margin for error is much smaller in that fight. I think that's when you see one small mistake is gonna be tragic for somebody. Um, but this is what we got: Michael Chandler, Paddy Pimblett. How in the hell did we get Michael Chandler versus Paddy Pimblett? Michael
Yeah, I
Chandler
feel like you.
at one point fought for the title. Was in there with, he goes, Charles Oliveira, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje. I mean, and then Tony Ferguson and Dan Hooker. And again, this is with no disrespect meant to Paddy, but I feel like I'm talking about a class of guys. I'm not talking popularity for everyone watching right now. I'm not saying that he's not as popular as those guys, talking of a class of gentlemen that have a strength of schedule that is much different than Paddy Pimblett's. So how did we end up here? How did Michael Chandler end up in this spot?
I think it's what I don't know what's more interesting, Anthony, because I agree. I thought it was a joke fight, by the way. To your point, I didn't think it was real at first. Like people, that's how people were pitching this at first. But I don't know what's more surprising. Your point, how did we get here, or how about not just how we got here, but the fact that Michael Chandler is like easily. I feel like he's a bad guy on this card. Not just him versus Patty, but even overall, like I feel like he's getting as much heat as Bryce Mitchell is on this card. Obviously,
I
with all
know.
the highlights of his infractories, octagon infractories, we should say the fouls, right? And
Yeah,
and,
well,
and it,
this kind of just popped up. We've heard Dustin Poirier say it, we've heard Justin Gaethje say it, but it never got any wheels to it. And all of a sudden, he's the dirtiest fighter in the world. I don't. I mean, Dustin Poirier is working the desk with me in Miami, and it's a whole segment. They're going to talk about it. And I was like,
yeah.
when did this get so much heat? Like, I don't know. I missed it, I guess.
Yeah, and and again, I don't know because again, if I have any bias on this matchup, it's probably toward the Chandler side, sharing past training rooms and coaches with the guy. Um, so I knew him from the early on days and whatnot. So I do have that stated bias there. But at the same time, like I do get it. Like I mean, they are fouls. I think we called them in the moment. The commentary was good about calling them out in the moment. But to your point, and we were talking about this with your producer Kelly, where it's like fans are so fickle that they'll just pick up on a narrative and whatever's air quote trending, they will just
Hmm.
run with that, even if it's not whether it's true or whether it's not even new, right? They will just run with
Right.
that. And back to my point, that actually gets baked into the betting line where you see Michael Chandler opened as the favorite, deservingly so. I know Chandler might not be a guy you can trust, so to speak, as the favorite, but he is the more proven product. But the line actually did a complete flip. So much money has been pouring in on Patty the Batty here. It is very surprising. And again, I don't want to take anything away from Patty because I feel like he has made legitimate improvements. It's just hard to know how far those improvements have come because sometimes in the last three fights, so to speak, his chin will be lower. He's making active to be tighter and lower. But as soon as the exchanges get a little longer, maybe you get into round two, the old habits start coming back, right? Once you get more tired and that chin
Right.
just starts to raise up again. And I notice he's got a real common culprit for eating left hands in particular. And even though Chandler had so many right hand highlights in Bellator, from his last Bellator fight where he knocked out Benson Henderson in the rematch from Southpaw, and he does the same thing as shifting one to Dan Hooker. Even when he was getting
Hmm.
thrashed for 5 rounds against Oliveira, he hurts him twice with a left hand in round five of all rounds, right? Like his left hand has actually been the cleanup hitter, so to speak, in the latter portion of his career. And I sometimes and that doesn't mean he's going to win, Anthony, but sometimes when I'm watching these fights, sometimes I'm like, man, I don't know who. I just like for the Mitchell Johnson, I just want to find out, right? But then
Right.
sometimes I'll have that Leonardo DiCaprio gif from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood moment where you're on the couch, you go, oh, right there. Oh, when you're pointing to the screen, you see it,
Yep.
Maybe you've had that looking at an opponent, like, oh, that's where I'm gonna fucking right there, I'm gonna
Oh yeah.
and that was something that kept jumping off to me. So I had to pick Chandler in this spot. Because again, even though I want to give Patty the credit, let's look at it. He probably should have lost to Jared Gordon. Let's be honest, right?
Right.
And then Tony Ferguson, I was a big Tony Ferguson defender, so it comes as no disrespect, but Tony Ferguson was done. He had, the strength and conditioning guru guy in his corner.
Yeah.
It was absolute scenes. He almost had Tony out of there at a 10-8 round, and he still fell apart, like completely fell apart in round three. It was really scary to like the ghost of
Hmm.
Tony Ferguson, right? And then Bobby Green, who I'm
The
a big
third
defender
round
of Bobby
tired
Green.
ghost of Tony
Yeah,
Ferguson.
exactly. And I'm a big defender of Bobby Green's style as well. Another style like Tony's who gets a lot of crap for his style for people that don't understand what he's trying to do in there.
Right.
That being said, let's not sprinkle sugar on it. Bobby Green is well past prime and has been on a down skid. So that didn't really age well either. And he kind of, it was the leg kick, yes, but he kind of fell right into that guillotine triangle setup.
Hmm.
Really early into the fight, we didn't get to see much. So for me,
See, that's how I
I
look at
want
the
to see
Bobby Green
more.
fight too. That's how I kind of look at the Bobby Green fight too, because I still think that I would probably still favor Bobby in that fight. And maybe that's my own biases. I talk about this on here all the time. I got a shit ton of biases, so I always have
Right.
to be very honest about them. I love Bobby Green, and jokingly said, if you told me Bobby Green was fighting Brock Lesnar and John Jones at the same time, I'd still pick Bobby Green. That's
Yes.
just that's the love I have for
Nice.
Bobby
That's what's
Green. But
up. That's what's up.
I still don't know that we know who the better fighter was after that fight. Again, it doesn't really matter because you went in, you snatch something up, you got to win. That's the game. That's the game we
Yeah.
play. The better fighter doesn't always win. They don't have to. You just have to be. You have to be there when you need to. Yeah, I don't. I feel like this entire card, other than the main event, is a lot of fights that I just want to see what happens. I just want to like Krylov and Reyes. I'm just kind of curious who shows up and who doesn't. Bryce Mitchell and John Silva. Obviously, the parity there. A lot of questions about Patricio Pitbull. A lot of questions about Patty and kind of where Chandler is. But when we get to the main event, Alexander Volkanovski and Diego Lopez is about as high of a level fight with as many issues to break down as an analyst as you can get, because there's so many different. It's really easy. You get striker versus a grappler, and you're like, okay, here's how he's got to stay on his feet. Here's how he's got to get the takedown. If he does this, he'll win. If he does this, he'll win. And then it just comes down to game plan and execution and who gets the other guy to do the shit they don't want to do. Those are really easy, even at the highest levels. A lot of times, those are the easiest ones to do. This one I found really difficult because they're both so good everywhere. Diego Lopez, very good wrestler, incredible jiu-jitsu. Judging by the reactions of the people that he punches, he's got bricks in his hands, and not always because he's hurting people. Of course, we've seen him land big punches and hurt people and drop them and get finishes, but even early in fights, he'll change. Like, he changed the way that Dan Ige approached that fight. Not that Dan Ige had a bunch of time to prepare and get ready for that, but Dan was fighting one way, took a couple shots, and decided to change the way he was fighting. That's something that gets missed, I think, by just the everyday fans. And of course, we know the greatness of Alexander Volkanovski: incredible jiu-jitsu, incredible striking, incredible wrestling, great cardio, funky style, just crazy strong. This one's really hard for me to get into, because I feel like what I do in this one is I talk about each individual guy, and then I don't know what happens. Like, I don't know what happens when they come together.
It is hard, man. Here's how hard it is. As a bettor, I bet both sides of this fight. Strategically, now there's strategy to it, to where, if just one of these bets happens, like for example, I bet Diego Lopez to win in rounds 1 or 2, and then I bet Volkanovski 3, 4, and 5. Um, Not that Volk can't win early or Diego can't win late, but that is one of the safer general dynamics where you can kind of maybe draw a line, because it's really hard to draw any lines, right? To your point, right?
It is.
But we can probably safely say somewhat the most safest thing we can say is that Lopez probably has an advantage with a more dangerous fighter earlier. Volkanovski should definitely have an advantage late with not just his cardio, but his ability to adjust. Whereas Diego Lopez, we've seen him, falter in round threes. Now, I don't want to judge those too hard. Some of those were against Evloev, which was short notice, or against Ige, which there's multiple interesting points. One that you brought up, right? Because Ige, for as much of a wrestling and jiu-jitsu background he has, and I can say this as an Ige fan and supporter, he doesn't go to it as much as you'd like him to in his fights.
No.
Whereas in that fight, he was going to it, and to your point, it was probably for a reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, if
also,
he forced Danny Ige to wrestle, there's a reason, because he doesn't
yeah,
typically want to. He will at times to steal a round. If he's sick of hearing Eric Nixick chewing his ass about it, then he'll say, fuck it, and he'll get one towards the end. Just if it's a close round, he'll get it to steal
yeah,
the round. But he typically won't. He would much rather stand and strike. He's got beautiful, fun fact, sometimes Eric Nixick, him and I will be talking about certain techniques, and we'll be on the road or something, and I'll be like, man, I just don't understand it. Like, what are you talking about? I don't get the footwork. Or if he's trying to help me with something, he'll use Dan Ige as the filming guy, because Dan Ige's footwork and movement is so clean and pretty that he'll tell Ige to do something, record him doing it, and then send it to me. It's
nice.
that's how clean he is on his feet, which is what is a big deal when Diego Lopez can get a guy that does that
Yeah.
well to change his natural want to strike changed in a fight with Diego Lopez.
Right. And the other side of that coin though is Diego Lopez kind of fell apart in round three of that fight as well. Now,
Yeah.
I want to be forgiving because it's easy to praise the guy like Dan Ige jumping in on short notice and forget that the sacrifices that the other party has to make as well. They weren't preparing for Dan Ige, right? As well as the multiple weight cuts that Diego Lopez, who's big for 145. Can you believe that? Would you believe me if I told you Diego Lopez used to fight at 135?
No way.
It's and not only that, Anthony, he has a catch weight that he made 132 one time as a pro.
That's insane.
I
He's
don't get
I,
blown away by
he's
guys' size
huge.
much, but he's huge. Yeah, he blows me away because I see fighters all the time. I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. You know how it is, Anthony. You're pretty good about sizing people up, right? At a certain point in your career,
Hmm.
you have that down. But then some people surprise you though, right? You're like, okay, I wasn't expecting that. And Diego
Yeah.
Lopez is one of those
It
guys.
happened to me today, actually. Uh, what is his name? Julius Walker. Do you know who that
Oh
is?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So he's at Factory X right now. And so I walked into the gym expecting like, yeah, he's a pretty big dude. And then I stood next to him and I was like, God damn, how
Yeah,
is this
he's
guy the same
deceptive.
weight? And I'm huge right now. Like I'm pretty big. I'm much larger than I typically am. And he made me feel like a little bitch, if I'm being honest with you. But yeah,
Wow.
to your point, like sometimes people just blow you away. You're like, God damn, that's crazy. But Diego Lopez
Yeah,
is one of those guys in Mexico City. I was like, I don't know how he's gonna make 145. He's
he's
fucking
eating
huge.
he's eating pizza and stuff on fight week. I'm like, what's going on here? But the thing is though, is this fight to me has a very similar, and I said this before. Uh, Brian Ortega versus Alexander Volkanovski, where I was like, that one, it feels like it's gonna be very much like Frankie Edgar versus Charles Oliveira. It's a classic
Hmm.
dynamic, right? And we
Yeah.
saw that very classic theme, right, with the Ortega and Volkanovski. And Ortega and Lopez are different fighters, and I don't want to oversimplify or disrespect their games that simply. But that is a dynamic that I look at, and I think that's going to bring out that back to what we were talking about earlier, that more Khabib style of Volkanovski that he has, kind of similar like a Dan Ige. He fell in love with his striking, his footwork, and all these things. Very
Hmm.
similar guys actually in a lot of ways. But Volkanovski really, he's not afraid to really go after those gears, which we saw against Yair. Again, another 5'11" featherweight, right? Another tall,
Right.
dynamic, dangerous featherweight. So that's kind of how I see this fight going, but he's going to have to, get past some early scary rounds. And on the feet, man, I think the uppercut. By the way, Diego Lopez's left hand, kind of like Chandler, it's a quiet cleanup hitter for one, but his right-handed uppercut, I think, is going to have a lot of play. We saw him hurt guys like Sabatini and others with it, and we saw,
Hmm.
even Max Holloway in that fight that he arguably could have won in the second series with Volkanovski. He was really tagging Volkanovski a lot with that uppercut as well. I think that's going to be a shot really to look out for Lopez.
It's funny you bring up the uppercut because Diego's uppercut makes me so nervous. It makes me so
Mm,
nervous with that rear uppercut because his left hand always comes down. It's because he's ripping that
yeah.
fucking thing so hard, but just the torque, it always pulls his left hand away from his chin. And that's why I really stopped throwing rear uppercuts because I have the same problem because it's powerful and it works. So then you really want to rip it, and then you kind of lose a little bit of the fundamentals in terms of your defense. And so I was taking big overhand rights off of people, and like that Volkanovski kind of overhand roll to that left hand. I don't know. That's where it's one of those like DiCaprio moments you were talking about.
No,
I
it
have those a
absolutely
lot.
is. No, it absolutely is, Anthony, because I actually went to study see what the common culprit was for Lopez, and I know it's gonna blow your balls, so maybe the blow your hair back thing doesn't go, but it might blow your hair back. But like right hands are the thing that land more than leg kicks, more than body shots, more than left hooks, even more than jabs. Even though the jab is really effective against Lopez, it's right hands
Hmm.
that seem to hit him the most.
Yeah, I
Which
don't know. And just
usually when
I didn't know that, but just
I don't know,
looking at it all the time, I just picture
right there
this
go.
uppercut and then Volkanovski just countering, like stepping in deep with an overhand. And who knows?
Yep.
Lopez has got a great chin up to this point. Maybe he takes it and eats it, and I look stupid as shit. But I feel like that's if I'm a Volkanovski guy, that's something that I'm looking at for sure. Definitely.
100%, which is why I think the jab's going to be key, right? That's going to be I think it's going to really dictate that traffic because that right hand, to your point, Anthony, that I think that's that's what's going to be there. Usually when I do that basic forensic science, which doesn't mean anything, of course, it doesn't mean it's going to guarantee this or that. But a lot of the times it's usually the lead hand that gets guys the most because maybe it's that old street fight mentality, like, oh, the probably going to throw a right hand on me. You're like ready to duck. You're ready to get in.
Right.
Like, I feel like we're naturally probably more wired for that power, that rear threat, right? That
Hmm.
a lot of times when I'm doing this math, it's a lot of times it's the lead hand that's getting guys more. So for the fact that it was actually the rear hand for Lopez, and you actually put together some actual like showing the work on why that could be possible, that was cool. That was cool right there.
Yeah, that's perfect. All right, man. Well, I've kept you longer than I said I was going to, so I really, I really appreciate you coming on here. I hope that everyone that watches this now has the same respect for your analysis, and not only just on the betting side, but the analytical side of it, the numbers. You do a really good fucking job, man. I love I love your content. Sometimes I have to not watch it because sometimes it'll change my own mind on shit that I see in terms of the X's and the O's. I'm like, fuck, now what do I do? Because now he's got me thinking the other direction. So I try not to always dig into it too close to the fights, but I never watch it for my own fights because uh, then you'll really start fucking with me, and I can't handle that. So
Dude,
again, man,
you're one
I
of the hardest to
appreciate you.
break down because Anthony, you're one of the hardest to break down because you're a favorite of mine, and that's before you were the first fighter to shout out my podcast. So, uh, legit love here, and I appreciate those words coming from someone like you. That means so much. Appreciate you even having me. Hopefully, the conversation helped the audience get a better perspective on how they want to approach the weekend.
Hey, are you bringing that podcast back or what? Why don't we plug this thing so people at
Yeah,
least
yeah,
take a look
I'm
at it?
bringing it back this week so YouTube doesn't take away my monetization. But if you want to follow me, Dan Tom MMA on any social platform, including YouTube, I'll pop up there. And Thursday evening, I will be back with the Protect Your Neck podcast, give you guys a full breakdown because this card is so big, I had to come back for it.
Incredible. All right, everyone, go follow his socials. Go follow that YouTube channel, and hopefully, I can convince him to come on here more often. Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate you.
Anytime, brother.
We absolutely need to bring Dan Tom on here more. He is so smart. Thanks to him and I were talking before you guys had a bunch of conversations about storylines of this card, the older against the younger, the older, shorter guys against the longer, younger guys that are a little bit more flashy, sexier. He's just, I wish more people knew him because just has a great MMA mind.
Yeah, I've been screaming that guy's praises for a long time.
You have.
He's one of the best in the business at what he does, um, and that's why we had to bring him in because my picks have been so bad. I don't know, and honestly, I don't know that he helped me out a whole lot there. So we're gonna see, but
I
I'm
was waiting
definitely
too. I had DraftKings up, and every
yeah.
time you guys would get down to it, I'm going to stay away from this fight, though. I was
I
like, you
know.
got to be kidding.
You're like, damn it.
I was like, who are we
Um,
betting on?
no, I definitely want to bring him in. I want to bring him in more often. Just it's a different perspective. He's very analytical. He's good with the numbers. I don't use a lot of the numbers in my breakdown. I will if the numbers, because it's not what I do. I'm an X's and O's guy. I just look at what I'm looking at, and I try to formulate whatever I think is going to happen. But I'll use the numbers if it strengthens the point that I'm already trying to make. And he's a very good analyst. He's just very different than I am, and it's refreshing. I like listening to it.
Let's see if he helps you out because we
Yeah,
talked about it at the start of the show.
fine. Okay, this is where I get angry
Fighters are
again. This is where I get angry
fighters
again.
are back on the board. I said my piece earlier. Fighters are back on the board.
Mm-hmm.
It is now 2-5, so you guys do still have some work to do in the next few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But this card feels like the place to do it. It's the best pay-per-view of the year thus far. Down in Florida, where Gilbert and Hinato are, it feels like they're close to home. You're certainly not, but it just makes for good energy. I'm going to root for the fighters here. Usually I root for the casuals. I'll root for the fighters this week.
Here's what I'm going to propose to the casuals. If I get every pick right on the main card,
You said this last week.
this should
and you
count
only
for
got 2
two.
fights right.
This should count for 2. We should get 2
You
points.
promised a clean sweep last week and got 2 fights right.
Listen,
in
listen,
good consciousness,
it's
I
fine.
can't allow this to happen again.
No, well, if then they shouldn't be too worried about it. But if I get a clean sweep on the main card, I propose that the casuals should give us fighters 2 points.
Well, good luck with that.
Okay. Anyways, let's get into it.
I don't make those decisions are above my pay grade.
I just made it, and Gilbert and Moicano are on board with me. So that's what's happening. I already talked to them. I sent them a text. They're down with it.
Perfect.
We're going to start with my former opponent, Dominic Reyes versus Nikita Krylov. We talked a lot about this fight with Dan and kind of the inconsistency and unpredictability of both guys. I just feel like I can see a clear path to victory for Nikita Krylov. I think he's going to wrestle. I think he's going to do it a lot. And I think that's his path to victory. This is the one that makes me nervous. It's Bryce Mitchell, John Silva. I think all the talking heads in the sport, I think all the analysts, I think all the bettors, I think all the handicappers and all the casuals will bet the house on John Silva. I just feel like this is a trap fight. This is one of those fights where you can pinpoint and poke holes in Bryce's game and say that Silva's the better striker here. He's going to be more dangerous here. He's a good wrestler. He's going to get back to his feet. I feel like these are the type of fights Bryce Mitchell thrives in. And I just want to pose a question to you guys. Is John Silva a better, more dangerous striker than Edson Barboza? I don't know that we can say that. I don't know that I can argue the other direction either, but I wouldn't say John Silva is going to be a significantly larger jump in competition than Edson Barboza. Let's take away what you think about Bryce. The motherfucker can fight. He can fight, and he's willing. He will step in the pocket. He will grab a hold of you. He got a couple takedowns on Ilia Topuria. Yeah, maybe he got shut off by Josh Emmett, but him and fucking a whole lot of other people. That's just what Josh Emmett does. So regardless of how you guys might or might not feel about Bryce, the guy can fucking fight. And I am going to pick Bryce Mitchell. Yair Rodriguez, Patricio Pitbull. I think that Yair is just such a difficult fight. He's so hard to fight. Unless you're an elite dude in the division, I don't see you beating Yair. You have to be so good everywhere. Defensively, you have to be magical. Offensively, you have to give Yair something to be afraid of and hesitate himself and have some sort of reason to not just wade into the range and start throwing all his crazy shit. You got to have a solid wrestling background. Like we talked about with Dan, Pitbull has a solid wrestling game, isn't always wanting to use it. I just see more tools for Yair. Michael Chandler, Patty Pimblett. This one's fairly simple.
So that means you're picking Yair.
Oh, I'm going Yair. Sorry.
Okay.
Going Yair Rodriguez. Michael Chandler, Patty Pimblett. I don't think Patty's bad. I don't think he's bad at all. I think that he's grown a lot. I just think Michael Chandler knows that he needs this win really bad. He can't take a loss off Patty Pimblett. He can't, because then everything else goes away. His a Patricio Pitbull rematch for like the 19th time goes out the window with a loss over Patty, or a loss from Patty. A loss to Patty. There's no more Connor matchups. There's no more Charles. There's no more Dustin. There's no more Gaethje. Like, none of those opportunities that are currently available just because of his excitement are going to be available after taking a loss to Patty. And I think a Chandler that's backed against the wall is one of the most dangerous versions of Chandler. I really like the breakdown with the numbers in terms of Patty Pimblett taking big left hands and Chandler having a great left hand. I thought that was really interesting. So I am going to go Michael Chandler. In Volkanovski versus Diego Lopez, I just think we can I could go on and on and on and drag this whole fucking thing out. Talk about everything they do good and where I think they're better. Like, it really comes down to one thing for me, and it comes down to Diego Lopez at times fights a bit free. He fights a bit free, and I don't always see a hard and fast game plan. I'm not saying he doesn't have one, but I don't always see this progression of him walking down the path and systematically breaking someone down. He's very opportunistic. He jumps on shit. He's got big power in his hands. He hurts people. He creates this chaos, and he's so comfortable there. I just think Volkanovski's the type of guy that will take someone like Diego Lopez, find somewhere where he's a bit uncomfortable, and then just keep him there the whole time. So I just feel like Volkanovski's so experienced at this level. He's so experienced in this atmosphere. It's been like 6 years since Volkanovski hasn't been, or 7 years since he hasn't been in a title fight. He's so comfortable here. He looks great physically. he's going to have some things he's got to deal with, though. He's going to have to deal with the power, the opportunistic grappling, but it's all things that we've seen him do in the past. So that said, I don't actually know, but I do lean Volkanovski.
I actually agree with you all the way through, except Yair and Pitbull. I have a weird feeling about Pitbull that, and even if it's giving me Michael Chandler debut vibes, where Chandler starched Hooker, and he's lost pretty much like every fight since then, but he won his debut in such exciting fashion.
Right.
Is Yair Rodriguez a hotter commodity at 145 than Hooker was at 55? Yes, I also think so. I think he's a more skilled fighter. But I just have a feeling that Pitbull's going to come in. He's been wanting to be in the UFC. We've been questioning him in the UFC and how he would fare against this top talent for so many years now. I think he's coming in to prove a point that this was the right move. He belongs here. What happens after that? I have no idea.
Yeah, who knows?
And honestly, if my picks go 1-4, and that's the only one I get right, you're going to hear from me next week. I can tell you that much.
All right, so I'm going 5 for 5. Fighters are going to get 2 points from the casuals on that one.
In your mind.
Yeah, no, that's actually how it's going to go. I don't know. I'll throw a fit if that doesn't happen.
Great.
I'll just be a baby about it. But as always, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Make sure you like, share with your friends. Give us a follow on all of our social media. Subscribe to our channel. It helps us a lot. It's pretty easy for you guys. And yeah, I hope everyone enjoys UFC 314. I travel there tomorrow. I cannot wait. And yeah, I haven't been this excited about a pay-per-view in a long time. So I hope you guys are as excited as I am, and I'll see you guys next week and we can talk about the fallout. We partner with HomoFight Picks to get you the most accurate and well-researched fight predictions. They do all the legwork so you can focus on winning. Picks will be sent directly to your phone via text or email. It's totally up to you. The second we upload them. Use code Lionheart to get 7 free days at winnable.com/HOF picks. That's WINIBLE.com/HOF picks.